Good evening. This is the Common Sense Party Podcast. I'm your host, DOTWY. We are coming live at 12:47 on December 1st. Rate us, review us, give us 5 stars, give us 4 stars, give us 3 stars, give us 2 stars, give us any stars, give us any stars. We'll just assume that we're doing it correctly. We are available on Spotify, Amazon Music, Samsung Podcasts, Pandora, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, we still haven't got a Apple ID, so we're still working on Apple today. We will talk about what the Republicans didn't do, BLM supporting Trump, what year we in, and we're gonna discuss, or we're gonna hear, the Hamas, Palestine, Israel dust up. Let's get to it.
Surrounded on all sides, the odds of survival are 1,000,000 to 1. And with the collapse of the former superpower,
several powerful factions now vie for control.
the threat is real.
An evil organization calling itself Scum.
Only as Scum. Their goal, nothing short of total world domination. Led by this man, known only as Iron Claw.
We will be victorious!
Not on my watch! Situation critical.
Roll call!
Ballistic. Harpoon.
Mayday!
Black Dragon.
Sergeant Savage! Quick sight!
Melvin.
Right! Lieutenant Stone!
The odds are 1,000,000 to 1.
And that's the way we like it!
For this time, G.I. Joe Extreme kind of feel like the best way to do it. Again, this is Ninjas of sorry. This is the Common Sense Party Podcast. Our mission is to bring common sense to all the crazy stuff that we are encountering today. Okay. This is one thing I wanted to try to understand is Republicans don't like smart people. They don't like honest people, but they want to elect Trump. But I need y'all to listen to this. Check this out.
People actually have the audacity to state what they wanted. Listen to this.
And you put very sexy things like abortion and marijuana on the ballot, and a lot of young people come out and vote. It was a secret sauce for disaster in Ohio. I don't know what they were thinking, but that's why I thank goodness that most of the states in this country don't allow you to put everything on the ballot, because pure democracies are not the way to run a country.
So then you're
Okay, I'm gonna play it back again. Listen to what he said. He said the quiet part out loud. Please listen.
But that's why I thank goodness that most of the states in this country don't allow you to put everything on the ballot, because pure democracies are not the way to run a country.
so then you're
And
Wow.
The man said pure democracies is not the way to run a country. The United States is a democracy, and they don't want to put this one. They don't want to put ballot initiatives that are good for you. Listen to it one more time.
Ohio, I don't know what they were thinking, but that's why I thank goodness that most of the states in this country don't allow you to put everything on the ballot, because pure democracies are not the way to run a country.
so then you're
Folks, they are saying the quiet part out loud. Listen to them. Listen to them. They're saying the quiet part out loud. They don't want you to have a pure democracy. They just want power. They want power. That's unadulterated power. All right. I don't understand, but hey, that's just them. We're going to move to This is courtesy of Roland Martin. He's a cool cat. Y'all check him out. This one is about the election in 2024. Check this one out.
Check this out. So Chip Roy was on the floor of the House today and was just outside of his mind in a speech. Listen to what this fool said.
One thing. I want my Republican colleagues to give me one thing, one, that I can go campaign on and say we did. One. Anybody sitting in the complex, if you want to come down to the floor and come explain to me one material, meaningful, significant thing the Republican majority has done besides, well, I guess it's not as bad as the Democrats. One thing.
Ladies and gentlemen, sitting House member Chip Roy. This is an ad that's just waiting to happen. Let's hear it again.
Anybody sitting in the complex, if you want to come down to the floor and come explain to me one material, meaningful, significant thing the Republican majority has done besides, well, I guess it's not as bad as the Democrats.
Said that shit out loud because he knows that they don't govern. They just want to break everything. One more time, ladies and gentlemen, you gotta listen to it.
One thing. I want my Republican colleagues to give me one thing, one, that I can go campaign on and say we did. One. Anybody sitting in the complex, if you want to come down to the floor and come explain to me one material, meaningful, significant thing the Republican majority has done besides, well, I guess it's not as bad as the Democrats. One thing.
Again, he said it out loud. He said the quiet part out loud. You have Trump, you have the Republicans think they're going to win back the Senate and the House and the White House. It can't be. Y'all got to tell me, please. Y'all got to tell me how this happens. How does this happen where we know that they're not doing anything? We absolutely know they are not doing anything. Absolutely nothing for the people of America. But the same people who are struggling are voting for people who are, some of them are false narratives. They do not care about you. Like I said, I challenge any Republican out there to give me a bill or something that helps the 99%, the people who make $45,000 or less. Give me one bill, just one. Not that we're gonna cut Social Security and then we're gonna fix it. No, just one. Still waiting on a medical plan. Obamacare is the Affordable Care Act is the law of the land, and they still haven't done it. And Obama was out of office how long? 8 years. Still haven't done it. All right. And we have George Soros or George Santos, whatever the hell his goddamn name is, who's going to be expelled. And they're talking about setting the precedent. Tell them stop trying to cheat people out of their money, and then you'll get kicked out of office. All right, we're gonna move to the Hamas-Israel standoff. And for people who don't know, Hamas is a government. The Palestinian people who are in Gaza are different, and Israel is not. Israel might say they play victim, but they had a hand in this. Check this out from Roland Martin.
The Israeli-Gaza conflict is intensifying. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is not agreeing to a ceasefire and has vowed to move forward with its plans to wipe out Hamas since the militant group launched.
Okay, this is happening prior to the ceasefire. and you have a lot of people not understanding what it is.
Its surprise attack on Israel on October 7th. More than 8,000 people have been killed and tens of thousands are left homeless. The World Bank is predicting oil prices could reach uncharted waters if this conflict does not come to some resolution soon. Also, you have massive protests taking place all across the world for folks who are saying free Palestine. It's also having a significant impact on the poll numbers of President Joe Biden, as many young voters are angry with his support for Israel's response. Joining me now is counterterrorism expert, author Malcolm Nance. Malcolm, glad to have you on the show. So first, let's start here. It has been very interesting watching all of these responses. Folks were shocked by the Hamas attack. Obviously, Israel was going to respond. But now you have folks who are saying, wait a minute, you move forward with a ground assault. All of a sudden, now you're displacing millions of people, 2.2 million in Gaza alone, 50% children. The whole battle, do you allow in water, food, oil, things along those lines? Just your assessment where we are now, some 23.
You know, I'm glad you've asked me that, because I really want to put into perspective what a lot of people are responding to is about 3 weeks old. In a circumstance, a historical circumstance that's well over a century. And the development that's 70 years since the founding of Israel, which has been occurring nonstop. There's been a circular crisis for decades at this point. However, let's go to the precipitating event before people say, okay, you're bombing Palestinian children. What happened on 7 October was unprecedented. I mean, unprecedented in the history of Israel. Yes, they had multiple Arab armies attack them. 1948. They attacked multiple Arab armies in 1956. In 1967, another Arab armies attack. 1973, a surprise attack by Egypt on 6th October 1973. What happened on 7 October 2023, which was 50 years plus 1 day, was a terrorist group, Hamas, which is an international terrorist group. It carries out acts of terrorism. It is not a resistance organization. It is not freedom fighters. When they attack, they kill only civilians for a political purpose to impact an audience outside of the immediate victims. Definition of terrorism. They attacked Israel across the borders and went and hunted every man, woman, and child on the other side of that border. They did not bypass villages to go engage the police. They did not bypass towns to go engage the army in a straight battle. They carried out an ISIS-like act of terrorism. And over a day, they slaughtered by hand, one by one, 1,400 individual people. Literally used all their ammunition to fight the army, to execute every civilian across that border. Now, on the other hand, it did include some people you wouldn't have imagined. Sub-Saharan African taxi drivers, Thai guest workers, nurses from the Philippines and India. They killed everyone. And the purpose of their operation was to launch and kill everyone. Then bring 200 or more hostages back to Gaza and hope that the Israelis would go insane, come across that border in a blitz, and they would have an apocalyptic battle in the middle of 2.2 million Palestinians and hope that they would gain the support of all the Arab world and terrorist groups around the world, and to show that Israel was now fighting in the middle. Israel right now is listening to U.S. advice. They are not running into this battle. I call it Pac-Man at molasses speed, which is what we would have advised them to do when we fought battles against ISIS and Al-Qaeda terrorists in Iraq. You go slowly, you bite off sectors, you isolate the enemy, and you try to get the civilian population to displace. When we attacked Fallujah, 90% of the population of that city was gone, had moved, had seen the fighting was coming. Palestinians, the Hamas, aren't doing that. The Palestinian population is trapped with Hamas in the Gaza Strip, but the Israelis are going to have to carry out this operation against Hamas anyway, in order to eliminate them off the face of the earth, technically. And that's where we are.
You hear that? The Hamas and the Palestinian people are two different things. The Palestinian people don't want Hamas, but Israel gave them money, and they used the money for this planned attack.
So this is from Human Rights Watch, Malcolm, and they put this out on August 28th, more than a month before. And they talked about the number of Palestinian children who had been killed in the West Bank. They said last year, 2022, was the deadliest year for Palestinian children in the West Bank in more than 15 years. Well, I bring that up because as we examine this entire deal, you talk about the number of Israelis who were killed on October 7th, and we've also seen Palestinians killed. And so really where the struggle is now, I mean, I'm looking at these college campuses, I'm looking at what's happening in these cities, I'm looking at these massive marches as well, and the number of people who literally are saying highly critical of Israel's action as well is that killing begets more killing, begets more killing, and therefore there is really no end to this. President, go ahead.
I hear this argument all the time. I mean, I worked this region for 40 years. My first 10 years were spent working the Hezbollah, Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, terror environment. In fact, trying to isolate the location so that we can carry out hostage rescues of over 100 foreigners that were being held by Hezbollah in Lebanon. I mean, if you want to go back on arguments that are historical in nature, go back to the Roman occupation of Judea in 6 BC. Or, I mean, this region, this part of the world has been involved in cycles of human conflict forever. The Israelis or the Jews have been there since 1250 BC. I mean, there's this historical argument people want to make. I am merely trying to put it into perspective on October. If that attack had occurred in the United States, and it wasn't artillery hitting a neighborhood and maybe killing 3 or 4 people, it was summary execution of every person they found in that part of Israel. Summary execution. Took them, zip-tied them, lined them, shot them in the head. Very big difference from people who are killed in war, because war has a completely different set of rules. If you violate it, you do it deliberately, that's called a war crime. Terrorism is when you hunt down the equivalent of 50,000 U.S. citizens and execute them one bullet at a time. So the precipitating event was designed by Hamas to do precisely what you see the Israelis are doing. They want this war. They want this battle with their fighters. They set up to be in the middle of civilians so civilians would die at the hands of the Israelis, because to them that's martyrdom.
So how do you now deal with this? Some 300 go to my iPad, 300 to 500,000 people protesting in London over the weekend. Then of course you had thousands who were marching in Los Angeles, in New York, and now what you're seeing that this conflict is having a direct impact on the presidential election, because if you now look at the poll numbers, folks are pissed off, especially a number of young voters, at President Joe Biden's response to this. The State Department early on saying no talk of a ceasefire, and folks are saying, what are you talking about? And so that's the conundrum that we are now in American politics.
Well, look, let's go back to England and that march there. England has a Muslim population that is astronomical compared to the United States. So seeing 100,000 people march in London in solidarity with the Palestinian people is fine. People marching in Los Angeles, people marching in New York City. I wrote a Substack op-ed just a couple of days ago where I said the problem that we're having with certainly a lot of these young voters and even African-American Black Lives Matter activists, they don't quite understand some of the words, terminology, and things they're protesting.
Yes, a lot of people just going out to say they were out there and they don't understand the what's the word I'm looking for? They don't understand the difference between Hamas and the Palestinian people. They think Hamas and the Palestinian people voted them in. No, there's not been a vote, what she's going to say, in Palestine and the Gaza Strip more than since 2000 to like 10 years. And Israel has not been, excuse me, hands aren't clean either. This is backlash of what they did.
This isn't about, I mean, whose babies matter more, right? When Israel goes and bombs Hamas, they are not aiming at the Palestinian people. For people who have never been in war, for people who have never actually had to plan these strikes, who have to knock out 500 kilometers of underground tunnels, to you, it looks like indiscriminate bombing. I've had to plan these airstrikes. Bosnia, Libya, Lebanon, Iraq, Syria. We don't hit indiscriminately. The Israelis don't either because, one, it serves no purpose. Two, it does not degrade the terrorist group. Three, it just creates hate and mayhem.
So Malcolm, how do you then, though, explain to those very same people that the conditions under which the Palestinians are living, being unable to self-govern, unable to move? Jimmy Carter called it apartheid in his book. And so how do you still even deal with that? Because that's really where a lot of people are. There are people who are saying they don't want to see death on either side. They don't want to see Israelis being killed and Palestinians being killed. And then it all comes back to a two-state solution. Is that real?
Sure.
Can you ever achieve that?
That's politics. And look, you're never going to find anybody. I speak Palestinian dialect Arabic, Levantine dialect Arabic. I have been for the two-state solution forever. You know, I've been in that region of the world for decades. But some things you do have to understand. Most of the people that are angry right now couldn't spell Palestine 3 weeks ago. They weren't angry when Bashir al-Assad used chemical weapons and mass murdered 500,000 of their own people. There's a fight going on in Sudan right now. 5,000 people have been killed by two factions that have been fighting. Somalia, Libya, Lebanon. Oh, Jesus, Lebanon. I went to the Civil War. They had been massacring each other to the tune of 125,000 people. ISIS literally tried to wipe out all of northern Iraq and Syria and took slaves doing it. What people are showing here is one of two things. One, this is something they could wrap their head around because there's a lot of cameras. Or, to be quite honest, there's a lot of inherent anti-Semitism in this. And maybe they think in solidarity with their Palestinian brothers and sisters who are angry that this position is the right one. But you know what? This is essentially like protesting for Al-Qaeda, all right, after 9/11. You have to determine your terminology. And I've seen a lot of these young kids on campus do this. You must exclude Hamas from your discussion. If you say you're for the Palestinian people, God bless them, I love them. Be for the Palestinian people. But then you have to condemn the terrorist group Hamas that is using 2.2 million people for human shields. Hamas is underground, 3, 4, 5, 100 meters underground, and they have left the Palestinian people on the top to take the bombing from the Israelis. That's part of their strategy. Dead baby strategy, we call it. Terrorist groups have used it forever. I don't want to see this fighting, but this isn't a question of whether you can have a ceasefire. When you mass murder every individual, everyone, 1,400, one by one, then take 200 hostages, you're going to get what you're getting. It happened to us. It happened with Al-Qaeda. It happened with ISIS. Hamas knew what they were doing, and they abandoned the Palestinian people above ground to take the Israeli shellings and killings. Even though the Israelis are trying not to kill them, artillery, bombs, rockets, and machine gun fire, if you do not displace out of the battle space, can hurt you and kill you. In many circumstances, Hamas won't let civilians leave. So, unfortunately, this is called war. And people are talking like the Palestinian people weren't beleaguered before 3 weeks ago.
Well, but Malcolm, there are people who are activists who were talking. No. Follow me here. There were people who were talking about the Palestinian people before 3 weeks ago. Folks, we're talking to counterterrorism expert and author Malcolm Nance. You see right here a number of his books. You can actually check out right there. My panel, they have been waiting to ask you a few questions. I'll start first with Julian Malveaux. Dr. Julian Malveaux, economist, president emerita, Bennett College. Julian, go right ahead.
Brother Malcolm, first of all, let me say how much I appreciate you and your work and your history and your legacy. At the same time, I have to ask you, because implicit in some of what you said has been basically an anti-Palestinian bias. Is it possible to be critical of Israel and still not be being accused of being anti-Semitic? This happens to many of us every day. We are critical of the relationship the United States has with Israel, with the unfettered dollars that we've given to Israel. Can we basically articulate those criticisms without being called anti-Semitic?
Right. Well, first, I'm honored to be speaking to Dr. Julian Malveaux. You're, another one of my heroes. But let me answer your question quite plainly. I am a counterterrorism and intelligence expert. My job is simple. All right. We identify threats which meet the threshold of terrorism. We categorize those threats. We factor them in as to what culture, location, geography, all of those other things. And then we work back on the history. Hamas, by every definition, is a terrorist group. What they carried out on October 7th, without any question, was the summary execution, one by one, of 1,400 people. That is where I draw the line on everything, okay? Anti-Palestinian, I've worked with the Palestinians for decades. I love the Palestinian people. I think that what happens in Israel is quite unfair. I am not for the settlement of the West Bank. I'm a big follower of the two-state solution. I think that given the right circumstances, time, maybe even now at the end of this crisis, maybe the time for the Palestinian people to have true self-determination. Voting for Hamas 17 years ago and then Hamas never running another opportunity for them to express leadership or for them to express who they want to be in. And now it's 58% that prefer to have the Palestinian Authority in charge. Hamas wiped them out in 2000, in the battles of 2005 to 2007, literally wiped out the Palestinian Authority police. It is a terrorist group that is now running, all right, a population of 2.2 million people, and they do not spend their money on those people. They spent all of the piping that was supposed to be for underground water features to build over 10,000 rockets. They spent all of the concrete money to rebuild structures on a hundreds of kilometer multi-layered tunnel system, which we're now finding out is a lot more extensive than even we thought. The Palestinians in Gaza, the Gazans, could have all of that aid money used for themselves. We saw a good example of it on the massacre. They caught the pickup trucks that were being used, were supposed to be used for the municipality. The first aid kits on their terrorist groups were all donated by UNICEF for the population. This isn't about being anti-Palestinian. This isn't about being pro-Israel. This is about identifying a threat which traps as hostages the entire 2.2 million Palestinians. Should we be sympathetic to the innocent people? Yes, we should. But we should also understand that Hamas has now reached the level of ISIS, and they are going to have to, essentially be treated exactly like ISIS, which is the only way you're going to be able to get rid of the people who carried out that massive onslaught and break this cycle is to free the Palestinian people out the terrorism.
Let me also remind you that the Bush administration was told by the PLO not to keep pressing for that election in Gaza. They ignored the PLO, and we see what has happened. There was the election. They said Hamas was going to win, and that's what happened. And there's not been an election in Gaza since. Former
I make a quick point on that. Because the Israelis, and here's where I criticize the Israelis, were so damn focused on killing Yasser Arafat and getting rid of their old nemesis, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which became the Palestinian Authority, that they didn't, either they understood or they just didn't comprehend. They were electing a radical terrorist group.
Well, we now have Israelis who've been critical of Netanyahu for basically cutting off the PLO and in a sense encouraging money going to Hamas in order to split those two apart. And this is now what we're left with. So to your point, what they did then is what Netanyahu, frankly, has continued up till this day.
Roland, Malcolm didn't answer my question about whether it was possible to be critical of Israel and still not be described as anti-Semitic. I think this is really important for some of the young people who are protesting and for many others.
Malcolm?
Sure, I did it. Not a minute ago. I was critical of Israel without being anti-Semitic. This is politics. This isn't religion. But what we're finding in some of the protests, and again, I wrote this Substack because I got sent some horrific stuff by African Americans. I can tell when Palestinian Americans or Arab Americans or others, people from Southwest Asia write to me in Arabic but we have some people here who are now essentially letting their freak flags fly. They are coming out and revealing an inner anti-Semitism, which, to be quite honest, is not normal for this clash between African Americans and Jews. And they're making it that, not Israelis, not Netanyahu. No one is ever going to support Netanyahu after this massacre. He was a criminal, essentially about to lose power, worked with the right wing, and he is responsible for a lot of this. But the terrorist attack, he is not responsible for, other than the fact that he moved 3 brigades off that border in order to suppress, assist settlers in the West Bank. Things will have to change here. You can criticize Israel, but you can and not be considered anti-Semitic. But if you support Hamas openly, which I have seen, now you are supporting a terrorist group. And that is where you're probably going to have a lot of trouble.
Renita Shannon, go ahead.
Well, first I want to say, I take offense to you saying that anybody who sort of doesn't see the conflict the way that you see it, they are people who just learned how to spell Palestine last week. It's not true. Many folks have been informed about this ongoing conflict and what has happened and looking much further than October 7th and going back decades. I think that is represented by the fact that you do have people across the world who are standing in support of Palestinians, and also by the fact that you have what is a growing and significant Jewish voice of, that is building and growing, that are saying, not in our name, we want a ceasefire, and have consistently stood for Palestinian rights. So I'm going to ask you more of a political question, since you sort of walked into what type of people you feel do not share your same viewpoint. And so the political question is, what would you say to people who are looking at this and are thinking about the fact that here in America, they are paying tax dollars? As Black folks, we are constantly being told that we can't have reparations because that's too expensive. We are constantly being told as Americans altogether that we can't do any sort of broad health care because that's too expensive. We're told we can't have child care, universal child care support, because that's too expensive. Everything is too expensive, but what is never too expensive is funding wars that are going on outside of the country. What would you say to people who feel like that? Because many people, they do know how to read, they have studied history, and they just have a different view than you.
Yeah, well, my view comes from the counterterrorism perspective as the person that had to deal with these people when I say people, I'm talking terrorists. All right. I am not talking the people of Palestine. And the only way that you generally get rid of terrorist groups is you have to have the population lose their support, to have the shackles lifted off of them from groups like ISIS and Al Qaeda and the Shabab in Somalia. And that's the only way that they can start moving forward with their lives. So that's the perspective that I come from. It is not an anti-Semitic perspective. It is not an anti-Arab perspective. I've worked with both on both sides. and certainly every country that surrounds them from a military and intelligence understand it. And believe me, a lot of people are new to this. For those who aren't, bravo. Help educate the people who have just come into this. And, and this is no slam to the people who are emotional about this, because it is an emotional issue. I was just in Dubai and Qatar on the days after the attack. At the same time, Secretary Blinken and Secretary of Defense Austin were there. And the Gulf states, even for all of their rhetoric, are really tired of the terrorism and having to fund, these international groups. But here, for people who are here on this side, who see money going overseas, the kind of money we're talking about is one fraction of a percent here in the United States. Now, Israel every year got $3.5 billion in defense support. As a balance for the treaty that they had with Egypt, with Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin, we give Egypt $3.5 billion in defense support so that they can combat their current ISIS problem that's occurring in the Sinai. So what do you say? Why shouldn't we keep that money at home? We have more than enough money to walk and chew gum at the same time. Now, you're talking to a person who fought in Ukraine for a year with the International Legion. I hear this same argument about Ukraine, even though we're actually saving money by giving these archaic weapon systems that would have to be disposed of and paid for through breakers and people getting rid of ammunition the same way. You are not, as a person who is in, let's say, Detroit, going to receive 155 millimeter artillery shells that the United States already pre-positioned in Israel for a broader Middle East war. We are giving them those stocks. We are not giving the Israeli government money to expand their economy. We are not giving the Israeli government money to buy new villas. We are giving them war stocks that the United States paid for decades ago, which we store in Israel in order for them to start to carry out the operation that they may need. Not to mention, it's not just Hamas. Israel is preparing because they may have a multi-front war with terrorists in Lebanon, Hezbollah, a group that I worked against for decades, all right, that are back direct.
All right, I don't think he's going to answer the question, but the answer to the question for anyone who's listening, vote people who align with what you think. Don't stay home in 2024. Vote people who want reparations, who want health care, who want to help the 99% of the people who work hard. Vote for those people.
Directly by Iran, Shia Muslim militias that operate out of Syria that attack across the Golan Heights. You may have a three-front war, and not to mention Iran by extension, which had its subordinates in Yemen fire missiles towards Israel. This can get a lot worse. And if you want to talk about American money going somewhere, just imagine this becoming a regional war between Iran, Syria, parts of Lebanon, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and then the offensive that they're doing against Hamas. It's better that this not get out of control and that the United States support it with the resources which are already there.
Omokongo Dominga, professorial lecturer, School of International Service, American University.
Yes, Mr. Nance, I have a great deal of respect for your work and really have just an appreciation of not just your service, but your family's history of service. I think, being on a campus, I see much of the difference between those who may, support Hamas, but much of what I'm seeing, and even in colleges I'm speaking at across the country, they are people who are able to differentiate between a terrorist organization and the people on the ground. My question for you is, I'm of the philosophy that you can't bomb an idea away. I'm of the philosophy that for every one innocent killed, you can create 10 more terrorists. And I just don't see how this leadership under Netanyahu, you described him as relates to the people he surrounded himself with. I don't see how this actually ends Hamas. In my opinion, I feel like this is something that is going to create more members of Hamas just by these violent attacks alone. You know this region better than most, and you know what people have nothing to turn to may turn to the most militant wing, like you said, who's also been empowered by Netanyahu in some ways, but that's just going to continue the idea of Hamas. And I just don't see how this current strategy is going to lead to the ending of Hamas.
Well, see, this is where I agree with you. I've written 3 books, including a New York Times bestseller, on Al Qaeda and ISIS ideology and how they fight. You cannot shoot an idea out of if you put a bullet through the brain of a person. But this isn't an ideology. What you're seeing here is a transformation of Hamas's technique. Yes, their ideology is they are Palestinian nationalists. They seek the return of their homeland. And when they say their homeland, they don't mean Gaza and the West Bank. They mean every inch of geographic Israel as it was decided by when it was carved out of Transjordan by the British. They're talking, when they make that motto, and this is where university students need to be a little careful. When they say from the river to the sea, they're talking about the elimination of all Judaism, Zionism, whatever you want to call it, all people, including as we saw in the October 7th attack, they wiped out an entire Muslim Bedouin tribe because they said, you were on the other side of the fence, you're no better than Jews. That's what they mean, the elimination of the state of Israel. Now, you and I both know that that's just rhetoric. That is never going to happen. All right, Israel is a nuclear power. They have a military force that has overmatch on all armies around them. Jordanian, Egyptian, Syrian, Lebanese, Saudi. It doesn't matter what you throw at them. If they go to full mobilization, they will defeat you. But in terms of Hamas and Gaza, the Israelis have made it clear that they are going to eat their way through Gaza City because that's where the heart of Hamas's forces are. Now, there are 3 more sectors of the Strip south of that they will probably have to deal with as well. But for the men who planned, mobilized, and crossed that border in essentially an invasion with the intent to kill every living Jew on the other side of the border, did a pretty good job of it. The Israelis are not going to be adopting a posture in which they will be allowed to exist. So they are taking a look at how we did the Battle of Fallujah in 2004, which is what our Secretary of Defense sent over advisors to say, do not run into Gaza. It's an ambush that Hamas set up for Israel. The entire 7 October attack was designed for you, all of you, to see precisely what you're seeing and to garner support Middle East wide with protests. I have an article coming out called about how Hamas needs those dead babies. They have pandered this about forever. And now we've got dead Israeli babies. There is blood up on both sides. But you can wipe out a terrorist group for this generation. But here's another thing I caution all of my Israeli followers of. There will need to be a grand deal at the end of this. Or you will go into Hamas 2.0, 3.0 with more enemies possibly coming from Lebanon, Syria, a massive explosion of Middle East terrorism. I predict we're going to see pro-Hamas terrorism here in the United States. And then you're really going to see American support change. We're going to go right back to 2001, the way people will start behaving. So something will have to change. The status quo of Netanyahu and now his unity government, he's not the only person making decisions, is going to have to start thinking about in the 2-state solution seriously. And I've had Israelis all week tell me to my face that will never happen now that these bodies have been stacked up in Israel. Well, it will have to happen because it's the only way to break this cycle, to empower the Palestinians themselves and to rid Gaza of ISIS. You're going to see in northern Gaza City, Hamas as a military force will cease to exist.
That is Ron Martin, Malcolm Nash talking about Hamas, Palestine issue. Like I said, people, please vote. Vote. Come out and vote. Come out and vote so these people don't put us in World War III, because people are protesting around the world for Hamas, but Hamas is the issue. You got to save the Palestine people from Hamas. All right, this has been the Common Sense Party Podcast. I am your host, DOTTLEY. Rate us, review us, give us 5 stars, give us 4 stars, give us 3 stars, give us 2 stars, give us any stars. If you don't give us any stars, we just assume that we're doing it correctly. We are available on Spotify, Amazon Music, Samsung Podcast, Pandora, Google Podcast, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and we're still waiting for Apple login ID. All right, this podcast is set up so we can give you the common sense knowledge so we can battle these issues. Today we talked about the Republicans telling you out loud that they don't want a democracy, Palestine and Israel, and we also talk about the Republicans saying they didn't do any work. So please, again, come out and vote. Please vote so we can put the people first, because the current Republican Party does not like poor people. They don't. So, and with that, we'll see you again later.
Surrounded on all sides, the odds of survival are 1,000,000 to 1. And with the collapse of the former superpower,
Several powerful factions now vie for control.
the threat is real.
An evil organization calling itself Scum.
Only as
Their goal, nothing short of total world domination, led by this man, known only as Iron Claw.
We will be victorious! Not on my watch!
Situation critical.